here today at lunchtime. I am not in a beautiful shiny office, but I'm using a virtual background because today is slight chaos, but I'm joining you from home in Northumberland. So I've got a real massive affection for VONNE and for the work that VONNE does to connect all of us throughout the Northeast with the other people that are working on the similar things to us, and to just really creating that network. Sometimes things in the charity sector can feel really quite lonely, and VONNE does a brilliant job of taking away that loneliness and giving us people to talk to, people to listen to us, and friends for life, because they get it. We all get it. This is where we are today. So I'm really pleased to be joining you to talk about communicating effectively with your bank, particularly during Volunteers Week. I believe that's this week. So if you're a volunteer, thank you very much for all the things that you do. And if you're not a volunteer, big thanks to all your volunteers and to you for looking after them. So that's that. A little bit about me. So I'm Claire. I live in Alnwick in Northumberland. I am a charity trustee. I have been a charity chair in the past, and I've risen through the ranks to become co-chief executive at Charity Finance Group. I've been working in the charity sector for 10 years now, give or take. And before that, I had a career working with local politicians, Liberal Democrat ones, pre-reform, so we didn't have to worry about them then. So I spent a long time working for Alan Beath when he was the MP for Berwick-upon-Tweed, and I found that about 90% of the things we had to deal with could probably have been less problematic with better communication. So I'm passionate about communicating really effectively. Hopefully I'm doing a good job so far with you today. And I think it's something we can really start to do some work on in relation to banking for charities and how we do that. So the next thing I'm going to do, though, I want to hear from you. I want a sense check from you. So let me see if I can remember how to do this. So, oh, have I gone too far? No, it's there. And as you can see, I can't spell confident in the notes, but what I'd really like to do, if you can join on Slido, either using that hashtag, oh God, hang on. Where's it gone? Effective communication, you see, that's what it's all about. Let's see if this works. So what I want to do is ask you how confident you feel about communicating with the bank on behalf of your charity at the moment. And we will come back to this question later on, and hopefully we will have moved the dial. But if you are able to log on to Slido, either using the QR code that's on the screen or going to slido.com and putting in #9390810. Oh, see, people are already, oh, goodness me, why does it keep doing that? Probably got the wrong settings on. Hold on, let's go back to Slido. Right, okay, so varying responses coming through there on the slide. And why I wanted to think about this was, right, there must be a way of stopping it moving on. I don't know how to do that. Let's talk quickly, and then if it keeps moving on, I'll just keep toggling backwards. Sorry. So why this matters, I've been working on charity banking challenges for a long time now. Even before I joined Charity Finance Group, it was an issue that was coming up on my radar. And right, can you just bear with me for a moment? I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to start again because this is not good. Sorry, everybody. I think maybe, right, resume slideshow. Right. Okay, let's see if that works. This is throwing me really sideways. So why this matters. So I know this is an issue that people have been grappling with for a long time. And in 2022, we ran a survey asking people about their experience of charity banking, and we reran the survey in 2024. At that point, we had nearly 2,000 respondents, and the recommendations were significant. They were really showing that the data showed a really high level of dissatisfaction with banks from charity staff, charity trustees and volunteers working with their banks. And we did a lot of work with charity regulators, other sector bodies and UK Finance to try and make this try and improve things. So we then had another survey in 2024, hoped we'd see some improvement. Sadly not. So we've just closed the data collection on our 2026 survey, and we are starting to see a bit of the dial shifting, but we are going to wait and see once we've done the full analysis. So the Charity Banking Challenges 2026 report should be with you in late July. We'll see what comes out of that.
Claire,
I think the biggest issue, yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. The slides aren't currently showing. Would you like us to share?
Yes, please. Could you
Apologies,
do that?
folks. Mandeep's just going to pick up sharing. Won't be a second.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Sorry, everybody. So that does mean, though, that now I can see. That's much better. Shall I just be Chris Whitty and say next slide, please, when we're ready?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
not just yet, but what I'll say the biggest issues that people have come up with have usually been around changing the mandates, so changing who the signatories are on your account, maintaining access to your account, worries about those being frozen or closed, and particularly around the know your client issues and ID verification. In 2024, we had some recommendations for banks to improve around three themes. Firstly, their knowledge and understanding of the charitable sector, how they communicate effectively, and the services and support they provide for charities. But there were also some recommendations for the regulators and some for charities themselves. And part of that recommendation for charities was really around good communication, good relationships, and putting yourselves in a strong position to deal with the bank when they come to you. So next slide, please. This is really what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what those recommendations are for charities around financial governance, staff, volunteers and trustees on what they need to know and how to communicate proactively. So next slide, please, Andy. So what I want to ask you next is just, it's not a question for a Slido or anything like that, but to just think, are you bank fit? Do you feel you are in a good position to have conversations with the people at your bank or financial institution, and that you have all the information that you need somewhere accessible, and that everybody who needs to have that has it? So we're going to work through a few things here. Firstly, around your governing document. And this could be your constitution, could be your memorandum and articles of association, could be your trust deed. So first question, I guess, is, do you know where it is? Is it in a safe place? Is it up to date? Have you read it lately? What does it say in relation to your financial activities and how you are authorised, who is authorised to deal with banking on behalf of the charity or your organisation? The reason this is important is because the bank may at some point ask to see your document, and they will want to see that it corresponds to what information you've been telling them about it. So make sure that it is up to date. And if it needs a little tweak, if you need to brush it up, then that's something for either a resolution or your AGM, but please make sure it's fit for purpose and it does what you need it to do. The second aspect is around your public information. And I think this really creates a triangle of places to think about your information being. The first is, if you're a registered charity, with the Charity Commission. Are the names of your trustees up to date? Is your address up to date? Is everything that they need to know up to date? Are your accounts and your annual return filed? Or are there any outstanding issues there? The second one, if you're a company limited by guarantee, as well as being a charity, then please check all your information with Companies House. You'll probably have already been through the slightly torturous process of verifying your trustee's identity, but that's really important to get done if you are a registered company, and also, again, making sure that the information is accurate and up to date. And the third thing is on your own website, if you have one. And there are particular areas to think about here. So you might have Timothy Shepherd as one of your trustees. If on Companies House it says Timothy Shepherd, and on your website it says Timmy Shepherd, and on the Charity Commission it says Tim Shepherd, it stands to reason it's probably the same person, but that is the sort of tiny issue that can trip people up and particularly make a problem for the banks when they're looking at it, because they, a human knows that that's probably the same person, but an automated ID check or whatever doesn't. So it's really important to make sure that names, addresses, they're in the same format and they're spelled correctly and they match. So that's the first thing to do, is really go and have a look. On your website as well, make sure you've got your policies, your list of policies that are available that a banking organisation might need to see. This could be around complaints, safeguarding, privacy, conflict of interest, cookies. So if you have looked at the latest list of on the Charity Governance Code or otherwise of policies that it's generally a good idea to have, if you have them, try and put them on your website. They don't need to be front and centre, but it's useful if people can find them. And again, as I said, just make sure your filing, not just with the Charity Commission, but also with Companies House, is up to date if necessary. So that's the first bit, really. We're going to do a 10-minute workout of just checking those things and making sure that we're bank fit for 2026 and beyond. And this is something I would say as well, this isn't something to do once and then forget about it. Add it to your 6-monthly governance check-in or whatever, to just make sure that everything, if you've had new trustees, that you change the details and that the details match in these different places. Just keeping on top of it. Once you've dusted everything off and made it look lovely, then it's just a case of keeping it looking lovely. So next slide, please. So this slide really talks about who needs to know and what. And this is about internal management of your bank or your banking information. What do you have? What is the role of the different people that are involved with your organisation? Do you have a separation of elements out around ordering expense, for things like you're buying something and then you're authorising that expenditure? Do you have some control over that? Who's creating payments on a bank account and who's authorising them? So things to think about there are around looking into your financial policies, your financial procedures and your financial controls. You need to think about conflicts of interest, trustees' expenses, what your reserves are, what your whistleblowing and complaints policies are, because this is around financial management. If we're talking about cash, what are your checks if you're handling cash? How are you making sure that you've got two sets of eyes on the cash and the money that's coming in? Who's checking donations are coming from an acceptable source? Who's giving authorization for expenditure and payments? What does your scheme of delegation say? I realise I'm throwing an awful lot of questions at you here. I'm glad this is being recorded. So hopefully we can turn some of this into a checklist of things to remember when you're looking at this. My main source of things for you to look at would be to go to the Charity Commission's guidance, and particularly CC8 on internal financial controls and CC26 on risk management. Now, we're not north of the border and we're not a political party, but I think the recent stories in the news about Peter Murrell and the Scottish National Party show that sometimes things can be going wrong in your finances and people aren't having that clear picture of it. So that is so important, that internal financial controls, risk management. If people are really determined to do bad things, it can be very difficult to stop them. But if you've put in as much as you can to manage the risk, you can show that you were in the right place for that. Okay, next slide, please. So with the best will in the world, sometimes you are not going to get the service you want from your bank or your financial institution. And the next thing we're going to do is talk about how to complain to your bank. The toolkit that we've produced that we're going to share about is called How to Communicate Effectively with Your Bank. We really wanted to call it How to Complain, but we thought that might be a little bit inflammatory for some of the banks and not necessarily useful. So instead we've called it Communicating Effectively. But complaining is legitimate. If you're expecting a service and that service is not being provided by the bank, you should be complaining. And there are two reasons for that. The first one is because it's your money, right? It's your resources. And if things aren't going right, if you're not getting the service you need, how are you managing the resources of your charity? You're having to devote extra time and energy to trying to deal with your bank when you could be doing other things to promote your purposes. So really, it's incumbent on you to say, right, we're trying to manage our resources effectively, and this bank, for this reason, is stopping us from doing that. But the second reason is a bit more, it's not philanthropic, public spirited, because actually If the banks get one complaint about a mandate process, they're not going to change anything because it's one organisation complaining. If the bank gets 300 complaints about a mandate process from across the whole country, that gives the people internally the ability to lobby for resource to sort out that mandate process. So your complaint might feel like it's just you. You won't be the only people complaining, and it can all add up to a bit of a snowball effect. So please do, if you don't feel you're getting the service you need, take the time to put in a complaint. Also, you never know, they might sort it out. They might sort the problem out if you've actually complained. So why? Exactly that. You have a contract for a service. If you're completing your side, you should reasonably expect your bank to complete theirs. And part of this goes back to what I was saying about sorting out your information, sorting out of that. Make sure you are in a fit state to be able to complain. Make sure you're able to say, we have done everything that is reasonably expected. We've made sure our information is correct. We have shared the right documents with you, and you're still not getting it. So, it's much easier to complain effectively from a position of strength. If your feet are firmly on the floor and you're in balance and you're able to just say, this is not right, it's much better than if you're leaning backwards and one foot's on a bit of a wobbly rock. So try and get yourself in a good position for complaining. When do you complain? Well, first of all, not every single time. Stop and think. Have you done all the right things? Have you been through all the steps? Have you asked for clarification if you don't understand, or if you need more information about why the bank is asking you for something and what they actually mean? So make sure you've done your part before you launch into complain. If you have, then it's time to think about a formal complaint. And the things you need to make sure you put in with that are firstly the evidence of what has gone wrong. So if you've got emails to the bank that have gone unanswered, or you've had response emails and you've replied to them and then it's disappeared, make sure you've got all that. And you do have to, when you make a complaint also, it's not enough to say, this isn't very good, this has gone wrong. I would also say you need to say, this is what would put this right for our organisation, and then give the bank time to respond. That is really useful to be a reasonable complainant. The third thing I would say is, how do you do it? So if you look at the banking toolkit, when that comes out, the how to communicate toolkit, there are some template emails, template letters in there. Who to? Well, there's also a handy links to all the complaints policies of, as far as we know, all the retail banks that are providing charity services. If there's one missing, please let me know and we will get the guide updated and make sure that that's included for you and for future people that might need it. And then what next? Well, hopefully everything will be sorted out and the bank will come good, and you will maybe get some charges refunded, or at least able to get on with what you really want to do and not just chasing the bank. But what if not? Could I have the next slide, please? So the Financial Ombudsman Service. They sound really boring, don't they? I think of them as a sort of superpower. Or superheroes. They don't wear capes and they don't have, X-ray vision or anything like that, but they do have an awful lot of authority. We run a charitable sector banking forum, and representatives from a lot of the high street banks or the retail banks come to that. And when colleagues from the Financial Ombudsman Service join us, suddenly the banks are paying a lot more attention, because they're going, oh, you're talking to them as well. So they don't like having to deal with the FOSS. It is useful being able to deal with the FOSS. You can go, if your complaint is not handled to your satisfaction, you can then refer it to the Financial Ombudsman Service. This is a free service. You don't have to get anybody else to do it on your behalf. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need a claims company. It's free to use, and it is available for charities with an annual income up to 6.5 million. You don't have to be a registered charity. There's one case study about a charity that I want to share with you. This charity complained about the time it took to change their bank mandate. And at the time it had 80 staff, £6 million in assets, and an annual income of 5 million. And they brought their complaint to the Financial Ombudsman Service because their income was below that 6.5 million. And although the Financial Ombudsman Service also deals with SMEs in the business world, and that in those cases they have to think about assets and headcount. In a charity, that doesn't matter. So the size of your headcount and the assets you've got does not have any bearing on whether they can act for you. It is just about your annual income. So you can bring a complaint to the Financial Ombudsman Service if you are delivering any sort of public benefit. So if you're a charity or a trust. Anyway, what happened to this case study? They had some satisfaction. I believe they were able to get their complaint there and the bank sorted it out. And there was another one about another charity who made 2 bank transfers to a scammer because they thought it was a supplier. And then they were unhappy that the bank had refused to refund the money. The bank said the club couldn't eligibly complain to the Financial Ombudsman Service, but the Financial Ombudsman Service said it was carrying out economic activities with public benefit, and so they were entitled to bring their complaint. So the Financial Ombudsman Service is there for you to use. Please have a look if you're in that situation. If you're unsure whether that you are eligible to use them or not, please either drop me a line or get in touch with the Financial Ombudsman Service and they will be able to help you unpick the situation. So moving on, we touched on this briefly, financial controls. So again, this is going back to CC8. I'm not going to go through these in any detail. Your time's too precious and you can all read faster than I can speak. So let's not have a look at this. But think about the why. Why do you need internal financial controls? They're the checks and balances and procedures to help you protect your charity assets, including all of its money and its property. Make sure that everybody's being kept safe, make informed decisions about your finances and think about your risk and also meet your legal duties. So have a look at these. And I would also say you can ask your bank how they can help you with your financial controls. Most of the retail banks that offer charity accounts do also provide guidance, information, support on how they can help you fulfill your mission. So, you know, particularly if you're paying charges, but even if you're not, if you want to make them work for that money, get them on your side, get them doing some stuff that's going to really make a difference to you. Next slide, please. So this is the other guidance that we talked about earlier. This is around risk management. Again, why do this? So we take an interesting approach to risk at Charity Finance Group because risk can sometimes sound negative and scary. It's about all the bad things that might happen, but risk is also about opportunity. What might you be missing out on doing, or what might you be failing to capitalize on? Risk is life. You know, we're all making decisions all the time about, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? Should I not do that? So try and think about risk as more of a, what are the opportunities as well as the dangers here? Don't let the idea of risk paralyze you into doing nothing. Really have a look at CC 26 from the Charity Commission. This goes into some detail around, you're going to hear a lot of acronyms and abbreviations, KYC, AML and CFT. So KYC is know your client, and this is about the bank understanding who they're providing a service to. Now we see a lot of information coming out from banks about what people need to provide as part of know your client. Usually they will want to know information about all of your trustees, not just those who've got the signature on the bank account. And that may be something where you have the information, or it may be something where you need to improve the information that you're holding. It's also possible to push back and go, you don't need all of this. You know, if you're a 3,000 a year income organisation and you've got 3 signatories on your bank account, do they really need the information about your other 6 trustees? I'd argue probably not. It's important to clarify with them what they actually want and why. And I always think if you know why people are asking something, then it can be a lot easier to say, okay, we can give you that and make it happen, or no, we're really not happy about that. So don't be afraid to ask why they're asking for information. And sometimes it can be that they're asking for information and they just don't need it. We had a case recently where we intervened with the bank because they were asking for, what were they asking for? One of the trustees had not been able to verify their identity digitally. So by like taking a photograph of your passport and holding it up to the screen next to your face, that kind of thing. And they didn't have a driving license either. So the bank was asking for a letter from an accountant that was signed to verify this trustee's identity. And we were saying, well, why are you asking for accountants? Is this like the old passport checks? Who qualifies as an accountant? Is it somebody whose job is an accountant, a retired accountant? And we got more information back that this was around somebody whose identity could be traced through their professional body, which all felt a little bit random. So we're now pushing them for a list of the professional bodies they will accept, because it just felt a bit not necessarily unnecessary, but perhaps a little bit convoluted, and there was no clear rationale for why those people and why that. So we're continuing to take that on. AML is anti-money laundering, and this is something that the banks are really involved with, that it's required by law that we keep track of anti-money laundering and make sure we're following anti-money laundering steps. So that's why they will want to know some of the things about where your sources of funds are coming from, how you're verifying who your donors are. If you suddenly get a large donation, where's that come from? How do you know it's legitimate? And CFL is countering the financing of terrorism. So if you're trying to move money overseas, that may also be something that you need to look at. So think about your risks, think about the impact of failing to manage risk, and think about opportunities. It might help to think about risks in 4 buckets. You could think about them as financial, reputational, operational, and strategic. And the big landscape risks, whether it's a pandemic or the cost of living crisis, sometimes you need to be aware that could happen, but it's not necessarily going to be something you can do anything about. Some of those risks around strategy, they are to do, for your board to be thinking about, really, as well as your senior leadership and that. But the financial risks, that's something that you can manage through your internal financial controls. So have a think about those. Next slide, please. And these last 2 are just quite quick. You may want to think about prevention of fraud, going back to CCA, financial controls. Again, this is about, why do you want to prevent fraud? Fraud is rising. Some of that's to do with attacks from the outside and scammers, and some of it, sadly, will be to do with people on the inside, people who are a part of your charity. So again, it's more thinking about, how can you make sure your charity is in a strong position to defend itself from fraud? And the final one, if you wouldn't mind, Mandeep, is around cybersecurity. And I would refer you here to all the advice and tools that are available from the National Cybersecurity Centre. They're really good at helping charities and clubs. You can run through some scenarios. They've got some great workshop exercises that you can do to help build that awareness with your staff. And I would say, when it comes to staff, trustees and volunteers, one of the crucial things you can do is just keeping this not a once a year tick box, yes, everybody's done their cybersecurity, but make it something that's part of the everyday conversation. One of the things we do at Charity Finance Group is, if somebody gets a phishing email, we always report it to report@phishing.gov.uk. But we also put a message on our Teams chat that says, just caught another one, have a look at this. If you get this, I've reported it. And it keeps it front and centre of people's minds that we are going to be attacked. People are going to try and get data, money, and into our systems. So it's really important to have everyone looking out for that, and to understand that, an email from the chief executive that says, I need you to go out urgently and buy 75 Apple gift cards for 50 quid each. It's probably not us. So think about, what are those tells in your email? We're seeing a lot more of this, and I'm really quite concerned about the use of AI to mimic people's voices, to create audio, to create video, as well as just the old-fashioned email that says, I'm in a meeting and need you to do this urgently, don't call me back. Most of us can spot those now, but there is concern about what's coming down the track. So just keep that cybersecurity and fraud awareness in people's heads. So that has been an absolute gallop through, firstly, the banking, how to communicate effectively toolkit, and secondly, some other resources that might be able to help you. I want you to think, and maybe just write down on a piece of paper in front of you, or type it in an email to yourself, what's your next action going to be? What are you going to do that will take 5 minutes or less this afternoon? And how are you going to hold yourself accountable for doing that? How are you going to share this with other people in your organisation as well? Because it's not all down to you as an individual. you're part of a team, whether that's a team of trustees, a team of volunteers, a team of staff, or a team of everybody that's involved in your organisation. What are you going to do next? Are you going to go and find your governing document? Are you going to check who's on your bank mandate and see if they're all still associated with your charity? Are you going to just quickly go on to the Charity Commission and Companies House and make sure that your people's names are spelled the same in both places? So I'm not going to ask you to tell me what it is. I'm not going to ask you to call it out, but I'd really like you to take one action away from this. And now it's time for one more action, which is going back to Slido. I hope this is going to work, because I'd really like to know how confident you're feeling now, but I don't know if it is going to necessarily work. So maybe you could put in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you now feeling, where 1 is not very confident at all and 5 is supremely confident and you couldn't be happier about how you're going to carry on making sure that your organisation has a better relationship with a bank and that you feel strong about looking after. I can see Jeff's replied already. Hi, Jeff. Shall we stop sharing the slides then and we could have a conversation and ask some questions? Thank you for bearing with us during my technical hitch earlier, technical hitches. Oh, it's lovely to see all your faces. Hello. Hi, Liz. Another 4. This is good. This is good. I'm going to open the chat in the side so that I can see what's going on.
And I can see lots of people are putting their ratings in. And Claire, thank you so much for all that information. I have been merrily adding links to the resources that Claire mentioned in the chat. So you should, as ever with Teams, get like this chat remaining, and you'll be able to sort of click back through, but we'll make sure they're included in the follow-up email as well, because that was lots to take in and lots of really interesting things.
So I'm very happy to take any questions, and thank you all for contributing your scores there in the chat. And yes, and thanks so much, Laura, because that is a huge list of resources I realised as I was gladly galloping around banking talk and more. Hi, Andy. Hello. Where are you from? I mean, geographically, but also your organisation.
Yeah, so I work for a mental health charity called Cygnus Support, and we were probably quite naively thinking a bank is a bank is a bank. We're not exactly happy with the service we've got, but we've got better things to do than kind of complain or put some resources to thinking about that. And then we had a know your customer inquiry, which we sent the information back on, and within the time limit that the bank had asked for, and we thought no more about it. And then we found out that we'd been frozen out of our account, and our account was due to be closed because the bank had lost the information. And then we entered a whole nightmare of a black hole trying to reverse our bank being closed and our funds being absorbed somewhere, and literally we would go out of business. And it was a business critical situation suddenly for us as a charity. And the bank were really difficult to communicate with. We couldn't speak to the people who were making the decisions. And the people we were speaking to in the Know Your Customer and the complaints departments were giving us different stories every time. Goalposts were moving. We were frozen out on the 20th of April. We finally got our account access back for payments in, payments out, payroll on the 7th of May. And we were this close to going out of business. And we didn't see it coming. We just didn't see it coming. So since then, we found that actually don't assume that banks are competent. That's the first real piece of learning for us. And, do push back. And also, it's made us wary that we need to keep our money in different banks, so that we have contingency emergency funds in different banks. So anyway, the bank did promptly apologise, and we engaged a solicitor that cost us a lot of money to try and resolve this for us. And the bank did apologise very swiftly, admitted mistake, and gave us compensation of £50. Now,
wow.
Yeah. The trustees were very insulted by that. It was completely disproportionate, but nevertheless, the bank have apologised. we went through the complaints route, and now we have to decide as an organisation whether we've got the time, energy and resource to go to the financial ombudsman. So my question is, realistically, for a small charity like us, how much energy, how much are we going to have to give to the financial ombudsman to take this forward?
So I would say you're not going to have to give them any money, but you will have to give them some time if you want to take this forward. And one thing that I have challenged with the financial ombudsman service is that and if you've devoted staff time, then you can quantify the cost of how this has been unpicked. But if you're a volunteer led or it's volunteer time, they will not allocate a financial value to that volunteer time. So I find that hugely frustrating, because volunteers give their time and energy to change the world, not to chase banks down. I would think about it very seriously. A few things that came out from what you're saying. Firstly, I'm so sorry you had to go through that terrible situation, because it is hugely stressful. And as you say, it's a business critical situation. One thing we found is that a huge number of charities only have one bank account or accounts with one bank. And that makes eminent sense if you're just dealing with a relatively small amount of money, 10, 20, 50,000 pounds in one bank. It's below the financial services compensation scheme level. But what it means is, if your account is frozen or worse, closed, if a bank closes your account, they will send you a check to the address they have for you. If you don't have another account open, you won't know where to go with that check. If you're trying to open a new account and you're saying, well, our last account has been closed by our bank, you are in a hugely vulnerable situation, because other banks will go, oh, Bank A doesn't want you anymore. Why is that? And it will raise some red flags. So 2 pieces from that. Firstly, if you've sent information into your bank, laborious and annoying as it is, chase it up and make them confirm, make them acknowledge that they've got it. Because, as you say, you sent the information off to them and assumed all was well, because why wouldn't you? That's what we do. But it's quite hard to be sure that they've actually got that information.
We sent it recorded delivery.
Yeah, and you should have been able to, and that's probably why you got your 50 quid, to be honest, because you could prove that you'd sent it. If you just put it in the post, I think they'd have said, well, we've got no record of it arriving here. Tough. So that was a good thing to do. But, as for the financial ombudsman service, I think it's probably worth submitting the information. You've already gathered it once for your complaint to the bank, right? So it's relatively straightforward to send it all on again to the financial ombudsman service and go, we sent this to the bank, this was our complaint, we've had £50 and an apology, we're not satisfied, we want you to look at it.
A huge amount of quantifiable staff time went into it. For example, our accountant regularly sitting on the phone for up to 3 hours waiting for the bank's channel of communication to open.
And the fact you had to take legal advice as well, so you've got a clear cost there that has gone against you. I can't promise that they'll come back and say, you're right, here's 10 grand, the bank are appalling. But if you've already got that information and it's not too laborious to put it together, I would think about putting that complaint into them.
I suppose the other question, just quickly on that, to what extent might we have success if we went to the bank and applied to their better conscience and said, well, this is broadly the cost to us. You might want to cover our costs and make a donation to charity.
I mean, it's certainly one to try, because if you're saying, we've got all this information, we know it costs us this much to deal with your incompetence, thank you for the £50, which didn't even touch the sides. Let us know if you'd like to do better. Otherwise, we're going to the financial ombudsman service.
Yeah. Okay.
Worth a go. But I'm so sorry you had that terrible experience. One other thing I was going to pick up out of that was, a bank is a bank is a bank was your understanding at the time. And I'm interested in how people are going about choosing who to bank with, choosing which institution to go with. One of the issues that comes up fairly frequently in our conversations is, well, we went to this bank or that bank because it was free. And I would say, think very carefully, not about what does a bank account cost you in terms of charges, what do you actually need from your bank? And if you start with what you need, you might find that paying that £5, £10 a month might give you a better service than the free account that you're going to have to chase yourself around in circles for. So always start, when choosing a bank account, think about what you need from that financial service. You know, do you need to be able to pay cash in? Do you need to be able to pay checks in? Do you need to visit a branch? All those things.
I think there's a certain amount of inertia as well. I mean, as a charity, our bank was set up by our trustees some time ago, and you know, bank services drift, I suppose. Sometimes they get better, sometimes they get worse. You live with it, as you do in your kind of personal life, and you know, suddenly you can find yourself a long way from where you want to be. But as a small charity, we have a limited amount of resource for all of the work involved in kind of signing up to a new bank and kind of making that change.
Yeah, it can be a challenge trying to balance out what the priorities are when you're running a small charity. And you know, I wish you every success in making those decisions. Hopefully this has been a bit helpful in thinking about the future, even if you can't undo the past.
Your report was very helpful in that we understood we weren't alone, so that was really helpful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's good. There'll be another report along soon. They're like buses. You can have one every 2 years, like rural buses. So, okay. Any more questions? We've got about 10 more minutes. Hi, George. I can see you waving your hand. Hello. Oh, you're still on mute, George. No, try hitting the space bar. Sometimes that works. There you go.
There.
Hello. Where are you from?
Northumberland. I'm involved with helping to run a consortium of small charities, happen to be all village halls. And I've noticed in the last 6 months a substantial rise in cases coming across my desk of banks just willy-nilly shutting down accounts from very established, well-run community buildings. And I just wonder whether it's a kind of attitude that we want to get shot of complicated, possibly complicated, certainly multiple signatories accounts, which aren't turning over very much and they're just costing us too much, so we'll just close them. Do banks have the right to close an account for no particular reason?
I think they should always
be able to,
yeah, they should always be able to give a reason, George, even if they can't necessarily give that reason in the process of closing it. So quite often if they freeze an account and they're asking for more information, or they've frozen your account, they won't be able to, what they can't do is say, you haven't done this, so we're going to freeze your account, because they need to be able to say, we acted when we saw there were things wrong with this account, rather than we give people the chance to put things right. It's a win-lose situation, because they seem to always be doing an okay job of trying to manage accounts. I have had a couple of village hall cases come over my desk recently, and we have taken those up with the banks in question. A lot of the time, in at least 2 of those cases, it's been the bank had asked for know your customer information, but the account information hadn't been kept up to date. So I would say it's really important to get that signatory information up to date and the correspondence address. There was also one of the cases where the bank no longer sends out letters, they email. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure, but we do know how long it can take the post to get through at the moment and the cost of postage, so I can't entirely blame them. But if they're not writing to the correct email address, or you haven't got like 2 email addresses with separate people, it's very easy for that correspondence to get missed and then not acted on, and then it can be too late. So I would urge all of your village halls to, you know, go through this, getting their information up to date with their banks. If there's a particular problem, please do drop me a line, and if I can have permission to approach their bank, their sort code and their account number, then we will ask their bank if they can have another look at it.
So Claire, you don't think this is a trend that's going to grow?
I hope not. And I don't think so, because certainly the people I speak to at the banks are enthusiastic about serving the charitable sector, about having an offer there. I talk to some of the challenger banks, you know, the new digital banks that want to move into this market. They do still see it as particularly worthwhile. One of the things I think is it can feel like a real mismatch, because the way banks provide their services are changing, and that doesn't always sit comfortably with those of us who are a bit older, like me, going, well, I want to be able to go into a branch and pay my money. that's a really expensive way for the banks to provide a service for a dwindling number of customers. So being able to change how they deliver those services makes it actually easier to keep running those accounts because they're less expensive to run. So if there's a way to get behind, get in line with the bank and go, okay, we understand why you want to do this. Okay, we can come and use the banking hub one day a week. I noticed the banking hub in Annex now open with 4 different banks in it. That's really useful. But also really trying to make sure that you're able, your trustees are feeling confident in using digital and online banking. It might not always be easy, but there is a lot of help out there to get people online. The other thing on digital banking is you'll remember that we quite often used to write checks, and one person would sign the check and then the next person would look and sign the check, and that meant you'd got some control over your payments going out. And there was quite a period of time when charity accounts didn't have the facility for 2 people to authorize a payment out of the account when it was online, but most of the banks now can set up so that one person will put the payment on the bank to be issued, and then another person will log in from somewhere else and release that payment. So you've got that dual control over your payments leaving your account digitally, even though you're not putting a check in an envelope and posting it to the next village for somebody else to sign and send on.
Thank you.
Hi, Tracy.
I'm not asking for my charity. I'm asking, I've had a couple of charities contact us. We're a local infrastructure charity, and it's the opposite problem. We've had somebody who's maybe a counter signatory who's been on the bank, obviously, has disappeared. They haven't took funds or anything. They've maybe died, which is an easy fix, or they've just
they've just moved on,
disappeared, moved on, and now the people that are left are having real trouble sort of removing that signatory and putting a new signatory on, and I've not really come across that before, so just wondered if you had any helpful info around that.
So, well, it's surprisingly common, Tracy, and I think this is part of the reason why organisations need to keep on top of who their signatories are, but it doesn't help you if that's the situation you're already in. Again, if you want to drop me the account number and the sort code and the name of the bank and that, if you can send me some details, I'll take it up with the people at the relevant bank and we'll see if we can get some help on that.
Brilliant, thank you.
It's usually not too difficult to fix if you get the right people, but sometimes if you're just trying to deal with the call centre or sending letters or emails into a void, it can feel a bit like, I can't promise to fix everything before you all send me 100 emails, but I'll certainly give it a try if there's anything particular.
Oh, brilliant, thank you.
So I've got a lot of love for infrastructure organisations as well.
We sent somebody down. We sent the person, one of the members of staff down, not our member of staff, the member of staff, the organisation. They were still like, no, we don't want to talk to you. It's very bizarre.
It can be really tricky. And sometimes you can work it by getting, if you can add people to the mandate so that you've then got a number, and then those, say you've got 3 people on the mandate, one person had disappeared. Okay, if the other 2 can then add another person or another 2 people, and then that group of people can write to the bank and say, this person has moved and we want them taken off the mandate. Sometimes that can work, but you do have to go through various steps for that.
Right, okay, thank you.
So I think we've got time for one more question if anybody's got anything. Maybe you're all just busy checking your governing documents. I don't know. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, Claire. Thank you for that. I think the bit everyone would love you to do is name your favourite banks to deal with, but I doubt you're able to do that.
I'm not doing that.
To do it more diplomatically, the Charity Commission in, I think, January said, bank sector, please be nicer. Are there any banks that made a notable change of stance off the back of that guidance from upon high?
I don't think I'm going to name and shame or name and praise any of the banks, Jeff, to be honest, because I'm very conscious that I'm not regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority and I don't want to give financial advice. What I will always say is the best place to start is just think about what you need or what your organisation needs from its bank, and then do your shopping around accordingly. UK finance have been quite tricky to deal with at times, I will say that, but also they've been very helpful, and they've produced a guide where the banks supply the information about the accounts that they have got. So the UK finance voluntary sector guide to banking, I think it's called, hopefully Mandeep or Laura can do some quick Googling, has information in there about what the accounts are and what's available. So that would be a good place to start if people are trying to choose an account.
Expertly avoided. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, doing my best.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I hope this has been a good use of your time today. I hope everybody that had a question has had a chance to ask it. And I'm going to hand back to Laura to say whatever she needs to say next. But thank you all for joining us.
Well, I think the main thing I need to say is thank you, Claire. That's been really interesting, and it was a complete eye-opener to me as a non-finance person, the amount of things to be aware of. So things like the links to the governance guides to check are a great starting point, because a lot of people just hear the word well, if it's me, hear the word finance and go, oh my word, I'm never going to understand it. So having things like checklists and things like that is a really, really helpful way to get started, because we all know that everybody is in this sector for the cause that they're in it for, and these things are the kind of practical things you have to then get to grips with to actually be able to deliver the work that you want to. So having practical, easy to understand advice is really, really helpful. Karen said, yes, I've just seen your message in the chat. Karen, we've recorded this session. Claire's slides will be sent round, and a link to the Charity Finance Group Excellent Resource Toolkit. Claire referred to a number of other links in the session, the final one of which I was entirely unsuccessful at finding, I'm afraid. But all of those will come round to you in a follow-up email. So we'll make sure that those go out and that you get everything that you need. But clearly, lots to take in and lots of really practical advice. Is there anything final anybody wants to sort of check in before we do a final thank you to Claire and let you have a couple of minutes back? Well, I think thank you again for all making time for this today. It's hard to kind of feel excited about the things that can kind of weigh a bit heavily, but hopefully that's helped you feel a bit clearer about things you can do as opposed to the things that you can't do, which is great. Look out for that follow-up email. If you have any questions from it, just reach out to member services at VONNE and we'll point in the right direction. But thank you again to Claire for doing the session for us today, and thanks to you all for making the time to join it.
Thanks, everybody. It was really enjoyed that. And yeah, do sign up for Charity Finance's newsletter, or drop me a line, or reach out to Laura and Mandeep, and we will do what we can to help. And Tracy as well, because local infrastructure, the unsung hero of the charity sector, I always think, you know, they are amazing, all of your local infrastructure organisations and people like that.
They are fantastic with practical advice on running your charity. So eternal thanks to them. But yeah, great to see everybody today, and thanks for joining the session.